This is Year by Year. The war in Vietnam and the battle for civil rights at home dominated the news in 1965. The growing anti-war movement was fueled by the wrenching scenes from South Asia that were brought into our living rooms each night. And Dr. Martin Luther King's famous march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, galvanized the civil rights movement. In the newsreels of 1965, we'll also see the Watts riots that tore Los Angeles apart. And what happened when the lights went out in New York City in the blackout of 65. These stories and more on Year by Year.
Since 1954, every American president has offered support to the people of South Vietnam. We have helped to build and we helped to defend. Over many years, we have made a national pledge to help South Vietnam defend its independence. I intend to keep promise.
Mr. Johnson expected America's promise in Vietnam, saying that the United States was ready to begin without diplomatic means to end the war in Vietnam. He called on Southeast Asian nations to mount a cooperative drive for economic development, and he asked the United Nations to join in the plan. The President's task is to enrich an existence of more than 100 million people. He pointed out that education and in modern agricultural methods is vital. Food is ever a problem, as is modern in countries where life expectancy is 40 years. Mr. Johnson further proposes to make U.S. farm surplus available, even to North Vietnam, if they decide. The first group of Americans wounded in guerrilla raids on the Vietnam arrived back in the United States. Americans died in pre-dawn attacks at Pleiku, and 126 were wounded. These raids that brought about a retaliation in North Vietnam have leveled several staging areas north of the South Parallel. All of those wounded who can be moved are being flown back to the United States for treatment. Meanwhile, the first of 800 American dependents are returned to the United States. President Johnson ordered their evacuation after the war in Vietnam mounted in intensity. Even as the civilian groups were leaving, the Vietnam staged a raid on a hotel housing Americans. Simultaneously, the United States said that retaliatory attacks would come whenever they are justified. 30 Americans at Quy Nhon brought to the fore immediately the strike-for-strike policy. The National Security Council met for the fourth time in 3 days to underline the fact that the showdown in Vietnam is reaching a new climax. It seems no longer a war of local skirmishes. A group of houses on San Francisco's Telegraph literally sit on the brink of disaster. They were supposedly safe on the lip of an excavation for a new 4-story building. However, heavy rains undermine the structures and... Many in the crowd said it was reminiscent of the famed San Francisco earthquake, but in this case, no one was injured. Residents of one of the buildings had left weeks ago, but the other building had been evacuated only the night before. Authorities have promised an investigation into why the contractor didn't take adequate safety precautions. Things are already blossoming on the hat racks for spring. The gals can let their imagination run wild, as they usually do. For example, oversized brims with printed silk shantung, a perfect style. A net dome of flowers and berries. Can't you just feel June busting out all over? A pleated front-flared off-the-face roller, and that translates to very pretty. Spring fashion shows do chase those midwinter blues, especially when they dish up such confections as this white cushioned brim of straw, a polka dot smooth. And how about this trick turban molded on a net shape? The models certainly put on a heads-up display, but who couldn't keep her head up in this two-tone level brim with a self-bow? And here's a flower hood that snaps either under the chin or at the nape of the neck. This black and white striped slouch hat will be seen come Easter. All in all, there's a hat full of dreams in the future. The nation's riding champion is recuperating in a hospital after a long shot, the greatest of his career. Walter Blum was riding in the field after Anita when his horse broke a leg. He tells his own dramatic story of the race.
Well, the race is at Santa Anita, and on the second day of the meeting, I rode a horse in the 8th race called Country Squire. And Sanin Trevino was on a horse called Chief of Chief. My horse was laying third, and just about the time we reached the turn, he was moving from third to second, and with that, he broke his leg and fell. And naturally, we went down, and right in behind us came Chief of Chief. And he couldn't avoid hitting me, so that's just what he did. Well, the doctors kind of let me down when I asked them how long it'd be before I can ride again. 4 or 5 months. However, with a little exercise and therapy, I hope to cut this down to 2 or 3.
The ancient Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa welcomes Queen Elizabeth. The British monarch is greeted by the Lion of Judah, Emperor Haile Selassie, on this royal occasion, the first formal visit by any ruler. The capital city has been all They even repaved the road from the airport, and people traveled to remote areas to cheer their visitors. The Queen rides in a carriage drawn by 6 white horses. During her 8-day stay, she doesn't get close enough to pet the palace lions, who are closely guarded and wear hobble collars during the royal visit. Africa Hall is the headquarters of the United Nations mission to Africa and was a gift of the emperor, who traces his ancestry back to the Queen of Sheba. During the war, Haile Selassie spent years of exile in England when the Italians occupied his country. This, he says, has drawn him even closer to Britain. Tribesmen gather from afar to lend native glory to the festivities. These are the same fierce warriors who once faced modern Italian weapons of war, armed only with their spears, and won many a battle. Before leaving Ethiopia for the Sudan, the Queen is entertained by 60,000 school children in the modern stadium. Thus, the future generation provides a colorful climax for the Queen's visit to an ancient nation. One phase of the anti-poverty program gets underway at Fairmont, Maryland, as the first of 25,000 Job Corps trainees arrive at camp. This center adjoins the presidential retreat, Camp David, and here young men from Springfield, Massachusetts to Wise County, Virginia will learn new skills and spend some of their workday on conservation programs. Most of the young men to be enlisted are high school dropouts, and the program will concentrate on vocational training to prepare them for jobs when their year in the Job Corps is completed. Besides the carpentry and welding shops, there will be classes in automotive repair and plumbing. The corpsmen will put in an 11-hour day and receive an allowance of $30 a month. With school classes, job training, and conservation work, they face a hard schedule, but they also face a brighter future. The airplane that man has dreamed about for many decades has become a reality. The XC-142A can do many things. For one, with wings at a 45-degree angle, it takes off within 50 feet, gains altitude, and then tilts wings and motors to the horizontal for speeds of better than 400 miles an hour. Then it's confined to a small space. It can take off or land on a tennis court, as a small propeller on its tail maintains stability. This remarkable aircraft can carry 32 combat-ready troops and set them down right at the battlefront. The plane's capabilities, both military and civilian, are almost limitless. Midtown air terminals, rescue missions, exploration. The new plane will be able to go where angels fear to tread. When the big league teams start limbering up in spring practice sessions, you can be pretty sure that winter will soon be on its way out. The Houston Astros, however, couldn't care less about winter's nips. They are working out in their new all-weather stadium. Completed at the cost of $30 million in time for the new season, the Astrodome ballpark has a roof that is 20 stories above the playing field. The heaviest hitters had been unable to drive a ball near the translucent ceiling. Baseball and football fans will be snug and comfortable. There are 45,000 upholstered seats. The days of splintered bleacher seats have gone the way of the 5-cent hot dog. The players say the new park bats 1,000, no sun in their eyes, and air-conditioned comfort. As for the fans, can't you just hear them say, "Hey, it's raining out. Let's go to the ball game."
Still to come, one of the biggest stories of 1965, the march from Selma to Montgomery. By Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., began a 5-day journey from Selma, Alabama. By the time the marchers had reached Montgomery, their numbers had swelled to 25,000. Their march would make history.
The long-anticipated Freedom March from Selma to Alabama's capital of Montgomery finally gets underway as Dr. Martin Luther King addresses the crowd at the starting point. Twice before, the marchers had been turned back by state troopers. Now they marched under a federal court order and with the protection of federalized National Guard units and regular troops, a total of nearly 3,000 men. For the first day, there are 3,200 marchers in line. Half of the 4-lane Highway 80 is closed to traffic. Later, where it becomes 2 lanes, the marchers had been ordered by the court to reduce their number to 300, a measure designed for their safety. There are a few isolated flare-ups between whites and Negroes, but otherwise the demonstration is peaceful. The first day, the marchers tramp a little over 7 miles. Those who have been assigned to complete the 54-mile walk hope to present a petition to Governor George Wallace. The first night is spent in a field near New Sister Springs Baptist Church. Their host, a Negro farmer. While 2,900 of the marchers return to Selma, the rest resume their long trek. Organizers hope their ranks will be swelled once again when the nucleus arrives in Montgomery. The Freedom March has been an historical venture in nonviolent protest. Overnight, there's a new strong man in Algeria. Colonel Wari Boumediene, in the light suit, confers with Abdel Amer of the United Arab Republic after a pre-dawn coup ousted President Ben Bella and installed Boumediene his right-hand man. Boumediene's ouster of Ben Bella posed many puzzling aspects. For long before the successful revolution against the French, he was always at Ben Bella's side. He trained the army. He commanded those forces with surface loyalty to his boss. His politics, a blend of Islamic Marxism, was the same as Ben Bella's. Why did he oust his former buddy? World capitals were abuzz with theories, and the most likely was that Ben Bella seemed to be wooing his former enemies, exiled Algerian leaders who had been campaigning against Ben Bella from France and Switzerland. Meanwhile, delegates to a pending Afro-Asian conference in Algiers were in confusion about the status of their scheduled meeting. One delegate remarked that it was like preparing to go to the theater and not knowing whether anyone had printed the ticket check. It's all up to Algeria's new Iron Man, Wari Boumediene. For the first time since the Red Blockade of West Berlin in 1948, access routes to the city are shut down by the communists. Soviet authorities gave varied reasons for this new blockade, including the one that traffic would interfere with East German war games. But the real reason, obviously, was communist resentment over a meeting of the German parliament in West Berlin. They did all in their power to harass this demonstration of democracy in action. As the Bundestag met, Russian MiG fighter planes swooped over the city, at times starting to within a few hundred feet of Congress Hall where the meeting was being held. The fighter pilots buzzed commercial airliners, disrupted air transport, and broke windows on the ground as they shattered every safety regulation. The Reds lost. Parliament stayed in session until its scheduled recess. Running to their cars in the traditional Le Mans start, 51 drivers take off for the 24-hour grind that will end tomorrow, almost 3,000 miles later. It's a race around 8 miles of public road, a grind that always takes a heavy toll of both man and machine. Early in the race, American-made cars take the lead position, but they are soon outpaced by the Italian-made Ferraris. Of the 11 American entries, only one is destined to finish, but both drivers and manufacturer vow to be back next year to challenge the Italian domination. As night follows day, they roar on. One by one, cars fall by the wayside. Only 14 of the starters complete the race. There's a crowd of more than 250,000 people here, and they catnap during the night, but are up with daybreak to see the finish. Two and a half hours from the finish, number 21 takes over. This is an American entry, driven by Maston Gregory of Kansas City and Jochen Rindt of Austria. Despite its New York ownership, it's an Italian Ferrari, and when it crosses the finish, it makes the 6th year in a row that a Ferrari has won. The winning mechanics get a victory ride, and it was an especially sweet victory for bespectacled Gregory. It was his first win at Le Mans in 12 long years of trying. An American victory in a French race with an Italian car. In a simple ceremony in the White House Rose Garden, President Johnson honors the space twins as their families look on. Hailing their feat as worthy of modern Christopher Columbuses, Mr. Johnson presents the newly nominated lieutenant colonels with the Exceptional Service Medal of the Space Agency. After Jim McDivitt gets his, spacewalker Ed White is decorated. Homage from a grateful nation to the men who, as Mr. Johnson says, effectively closed the space gap with the Russians. Later, the Gemini twins gave the president the flag they carried on their 62 orbits and pointed out again that the flight was a team effort. In keeping with that fact, the Gemini program manager, Charles W. Matthews, also receives the service medal.
Still to come on Year by Year, the 1965 Academy Awards. And the winner is...
Stone.
In 1965, the most popular films of the year were The Sound of Music, starring Julie Andrews, The Beatles' Help, and Thunderball with Sean Connery.
This is the night that Hollywood holds the world spotlight. The annual Academy Awards and the bestowing of the coveted Oscars has a glittering audience on hand to hear Audrey Hepburn announce the Best Actor. Rex Harrison, of course, receives his statuette for his role of Professor Higgins in My Fair Lady, chosen as the Best Picture of the year. Audrey was his leading lady. It's a popular choice with the crowd that next hears Sidney Poitier named the Best Actress.
Julie Andrews.
Julie Andrews played opposite Rex Harrison in the stage version of My Fair Lady. Passed over for the movie role, she played Mary Poppins and parlayed the part of that bouncy governess into tonight's triumph. As Bob Hope put it, Hollywood is handing out foreign aid. Both winners are British.
Oh, this is lovely. I know you Americans are famous for your hospitality, but this is really ridiculous.
In a year of many outstanding movies, it was a chore to pick the winners. The night of the Oscars was a huge success. A military transport pulls into Cam Ranh Bay with more men to bolster U.S. forces in South Vietnam. The 3,900 paratroopers are members of the 101st Airborne, and they bring the total of American servicemen in South Vietnam to 79,000. As President Johnson announced, soon that figure will be 125,000. The Airborne Brigade will be based at a new center 180 miles northeast of Saigon. At their new base, the men unfurl their colors, including the regimental banner that has a distinguished history. A proud observer is a former commander of the 101st, General Maxwell D. Taylor, whose son Thomas, center, is a captain in the division. General Taylor, who is retiring as U.S. Ambassador to Vietnam, commanded the division during World War II. The men of the Screaming Eagle Division lose no time in taking up positions on the perimeter of the new base. They will be responsible for the defense of the staging area where more and more troops are scheduled to be landed. With the war in Vietnam mounting in intensity, the men of the 101st are ready for action. The Harry S. Truman Library of Independence, Missouri, is the scene of an historic event. President and Mrs. Johnson and Vice President Humphrey arrive for ceremonies that will make the Medicare bill a part of Social Security coverage. Mr. Johnson chose to sign the bill here as a tribute to former President Truman. The former president campaigned for Medicare 20 years ago, but it took 2 decades for his proposal to become law. The new bill expands the 30-year-old Social Security program to provide hospital care, nursing home care, home nursing service, and outpatient treatment for those over 65. Medicare will become law on July 1st, 1966. And for Mr. Truman, an historic souvenir from the president. For Mr. Truman, the passage of Medicare is a dream come true. Tracking the cogs that made one of man's most ambitious scientific experiments an overwhelming success. As Mariner 4 passed over Mars, it recorded on tape tiny bits of information to transmit back to Earth. Engineers manning tracking stations like this one in Spain picked up the radio signals sent out by the speeding satellite. As the Earth revolved and the station passed out of sight of Mariner, another took over and received another piece of the same picture. Each picture, actually 40,000 tiny dots ranging from white to deepest black, was transmitted as 240,000 bits of computer code. Because of the great distance, 135 million miles in space, the signals reaching the tracking station were no stronger than 1/billionth of a watt. It had to be amplified 1,000 times to be recorded. From tracking stations, the first pictures were transmitted to California headquarters by teletype. The final results, in simple form, are like the pictures in your newspaper, made up of dots, called a half-tone. They can show each gradation of light and shadow. Pictures were transmitted by Mariner 4, and they raised much of the veil of secrecy that shrouds outer space. As the computers continued to receive pictures, experts began to evaluate the results, and they came to some conclusions that threw a new light on the planet. The pictures show that Mars is pocked by craters caused by crashing asteroids and space debris. What surprised scientists is that even the most ancient are still visible. They conclude from this that there has been no water erosion on the planet. And with no water, there is, of course, no support for even plant life. However, like all true scientists, they refuse to commit themselves pending further study.
The annual Autumn Madness is in full swing in Minneapolis as the American League Twins take on the National League Dodgers, with Vice President Humphrey on hand to throw out the first ball. He's warming up to take over for President Johnson. Mudcat Grant feeds a home run pitch to Dodger Ron Fairley in the second inning. And for a moment, the Dodgers are in front. The National Leaguers are favored. But before this game is over, the Minnesota Twins will have them seeing double. Dodger Don Drysdale doesn't have his stop today. Don Mincher's home run, also in the second, foreshadows things to come in the very next inning. Mincher's homer makes him the fourth man in history to hit a round-tripper in his first World Series. Frank Willise opens the third inning assault on Dodger Drysdale with a hit inside the third baseline that he stretches into a double. After Frank's hit, the Twins pitcher, Grant, bunts his way on. So, with no one out, up to the plate steps Julio Basalis. Fire the shot heard across the northern prairies. A 3-run homer that puts the Twins in front, 4-1. From now on in, the Twins could coast home. But this fateful third inning isn't over yet. The dust no sooner settles on the base path than the Twins put Baldestino, Killebrew, and Mincher on base. This brings up Earl Batty, who strokes it over second base for a single that brings in 2 more runs for the Twins. What they need is a traffic cop on those baselines. That makes it 6-1, and the Twins are hungry for more. Drysdale heads for the showers after this pitch to Quilisi, a single for his second hit of the inning that scores Fincher. That's really your ball game, that third inning. Minnesota scores one more run in the sixth, and the Dodgers chalk up one in the ninth. But then Grant pours it on to Jim Gilliam, who flies out to end the game. Twins 8, Dodgers 2. The next day, Minnesota makes it a twin killing by taking the second game 5-1. When the Dodgers headed back for Los Angeles, they were asking, what happened? Did the sky fall in?
Still to come on Year by Year, the streets of Los Angeles explode into an urban war zone. The Watts riots. Stay with us.
Karen Stone.
The front page news in 1965, Malcolm X is assassinated. American troops in Vietnam are increased by 50,000, and anti-war protests escalate throughout the U.S.
6 days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles left behind scenes reminiscent of war-torn cities. More than 100 square blocks were decimated by fire and looters, and few buildings were left intact. Firemen were harassed by snipers and brick-throwing hoodlums as they attempted to control the fires, many of which were left to burn themselves out. As the National Guard moved in to restore comparative calm, the losses by fire alone were put at $200 million. No attempt has yet been made to estimate the losses suffered at the hands of the looters who stole everything from liquor to playpens. Firemen were later issued flak suits of bulletproof mesh to protect them from snipers who continued to shoot from rooftops. Nearly 3,000 were arrested, and authorities had to open abandoned jails to house those netted by the police. It took the appearance of 14,000 troops to bring an end to what both Negro and white leaders called insurrection by hoodlums. Civil rights leaders were quick to deplore the unbridled lawlessness, and Martin Luther King vowed to do all in his power to prevent a recurrence in Los Angeles or anywhere. Uneasy calm prevails in what is known as the Watts area of the city. A curfew was put into effect, and the entire section declared off-limits to all but residents. The people who live here are suffering great hardship with no grocery, drug, or other service stores able to operate. A special task force of 1,000 policemen stays on the alert as the thousands of guardsmen patrol an area of 35 square miles. The outbreak spread to other Southern California cities, but were quickly quelled. And Los Angeles authorities say they are now ready to move with dispatch if lawlessness breaks out anew. The riots in Los Angeles have written a sorrowful page in American history. Here is a social document of our time. The place, Berlin, the setting, a cemetery. The border here between East and West is heavily guarded, but freedom can be won if you have the courage. Friends of an East Berliner raise a ladder from the west over the cemetery wall, over the barbed wire. Then the signal, and the fugitive makes his daring dash up the tilted ladder. He must feel that 1,000 enemy eyes are on him, 100 guns pointed at his back. His friends watch and pray. Seconds seem like hours. He's near freedom. He's over. One more man has slipped the red yoke. He's a 25-year-old mathematician from Cottbus who has a fiancée in West Germany, proving again that love laughs at locksmiths and border guards. He's whisked away to freedom while the East German guards watch helplessly. Once again, the Berlin Wall has been breached. Margaret Smith of Australia left meets Billie Jean Moffitt of the United States in the final of the U.S. women's singles. A threatening day doesn't dampen the crowd's enthusiasm as they see Miss Smith serving come through in the pinches. She trails in both sets, 3-5, but bounces back each time. Miss Moffat serves, and here's where the Australian gal breaks her service to take match point and the title. It's a right smart volley. And Margaret Smith adds the U.S. title to her Wimbledon crown. Then Cliff Drysdale of South Africa serves to Manuel Santana of Spain. Drysdale defeated Dennis Ralston and upset Rafael Osuna of Mexico to reach the final. And his two-handed returns help him keep in the running in this final round. Drysdale's point. Santana serves, and here's a study of the first Spaniard ever to win the tennis championship of the United States. Drysdale serving. Each man took a set, and now Santana goes on to take the third set, 7-5. Santana serves, and this will be match point. This is the play that enabled a Spanish ace to take the final set, 6-1. Another bright star on the tennis horizon. The U.S. Open goes into overtime as Gary Player drives in the playoff round. The South African tied with an Australian in the regulation tourney, Kel Nagel, and this 18 holes will tell the story. Which one will be the first foreigner to win this title in 45 years? Player is 5 strokes ahead after 8 holes, and from there, it's a breeze. Player makes history in more ways than one. He announces that he is donating his purse to the U.S. Golf Association, $5,000 to be given to cancer research, and the rest to develop junior golfers. He's that happy in capturing a title that has long eluded him. Now he joins Gene Sarazen and Ben Hogan as the only golfers to win the U.S. and British Open, the U.S. Pro Crown, and the Masters. To top it all, he gave his caddy $1,000 and a $1,000 tip. Winter fashions in Paris. The coiffure is called interesting. Even when the hair is let down, the knobby effect remains. Hats are more conventional and obviously to be worn over a more conventional hairdo. The main display is held in the Museum of Modern Art, where an Alexander Calder show is in progress. This one shows more of the touch of optical art than of Mr. Calder. Boots are very much in. Here the op effect is slightly harlequin. In terms of modern art, this storm suit is pure cubism. For allure, the lines of the evening gowns become softer, as though reverting to the Impressionists. The only word for the final tableau is pop art. This is the night when one dream is realized and 49 others are shattered. The finals of the Miss America contest. Girls from each of the states parade before a capacity crowd at the Atlantic City Auditorium. This is where the last political conventions were held. Everyone is in agreement that the scenery has improved. Then the curtain opens on the bathing parade. The field has been narrowed, but there's still a lot to see. That's the beauty. The title is worth a $10,000 scholarship and an estimated $2,000 for personal appearances. And Miss Kansas here has her eye on figures. Then the 5 pints. Keep your eye on the gal in the center. It's Kansas, and she's so bright that they grow some great crops out there. Mississippi Miss left proves to be the as Miss Kansas gets the nod. Miss America 1965. Tonight, strangely enough, the winner burst into tears. A crown for the Queen, who will be acclaimed nation's reigning beauty. And it is beauty other than skin deep. Deborah, for that's her name, will enter university this year as a junior, and she intends to go on and study. Anybody who will have Dr. Bryant as the family physician will be giving up certain fruits to take an apple a day to keep this doctor away. Next day, it's coffee with her mother, Mrs. Hurley Bryant. Here, Deborah will be one of the most photographed girls in the world. Couldn't picture anything nicer.
Still to come on Year by Year, what happens when the lights go out on 30 million New Yorkers? The blackout of 1965. Stay with us. A three-bedroom house with a 5 1/4% mortgage sold for $16,150. The price of a new car was $3,498, and gasoline cost 31 cents a gallon.
It can't happen here? Well, it did. The elaborate power grid supplying electricity to parts of 9 northeastern states and Canada failed. And the question asked by 25 million people living in the affected area of 80,000 square miles was simply, how could it happen? And no one had an immediate answer. Dozens of cities blacked out. One moment, New York was glittering Gotham, the Great White Way ablaze. The next moment, only flickering candles, automobile headlights, and bobbing flashlights were probing a Stygian darkness. The pulse of the city slowed until its people, given pause, analyzed their plight. Then, poise quickly regained, New Yorkers took their blackout in stride. Those with cars snailed their way home through colossal traffic jams. Those with no transportation dined in the romantic light usually found in old England tea coffee. Nearly 1 million people were trapped in stalled subways as a full moon pushed fingers of light into the darkened streets. The bridges over the Hudson were their usual bejeweled cells. They were illuminated with power from New Jersey, a network that was not affected. Homeward bound motorists could pass the time compiling lists of disrupted services, bakers and milk bottlers, newspapers and TV, stage shows and movies, and on and on. Telephones were operating on emergency power, and the company reported calls at far and away a record number. Some cab drivers became rich overnight. Some showed compassion. All in all, the night the lights went out proved that people in a crisis will try to help each other. It's pretty hard to spend a night in a hotel lobby without generating a neighborly smile at everyone's predicament. Some cities got their electricity back within minutes, others hours. Some parts of New York City, however, went more than 13 hours before they had power once more. And Gotham was slow in recovering from her near paralysis. A third of the workforce stayed home, or finally got home, and train and subway service took all day to return to normal. Buses, when they finally limped to your stop, were jammed. Taxi drivers seemed to have gone underground and taken their cabs with them. But who cared? The lights were on again, and everyone wanted to tell you what happened to him the night the lights went out. The richest Professional Golfers Association tourney of all time sees Gary Player tee off. First of the big three, seeking $25,000 first money. He's followed by Arnold Palmer, who has never won the PGA. Then this year's top money winner, Jack Nicklaus, shows a powerful drive that brings him a tie for second place. And here is fate's fair-haired boy today, Dave Marr, the ultimate winner. A perennial favorite, Slammin' Sammy Snead, he's to wind up 5 strokes off Dave Marr's pace after a gallant fight. The tournament is not decided until the final hole. Billy Casper is finished with a 282, and the crowd is rooting for Slammin' Sammy, who has a 15-footer and finishes in a blaze of glory with a putt that's worth $5,000. Marr is in trouble, but gets out of a bunker cautiously and then hits a 9-iron to the green. The ball practically freezes just 3 feet from the pin. Marr finished 65th and last in the 1964 PGA. But this putt changes the complexion of things as he wins his first major tournament since 1962. It's a cool and collected Marr who receives all that cold cash. In the golfing world, it was the comeback of the year. Gymnasts from 40 nations take part in a gigantic meet at Vienna. They call it a Gymnastrada, but by any name, it's an impressive event. Beneath the national flags, the gals hoop it up to get things rolling. The 15,000 present on opening day see some precision calisthenics. They do it with such ease, a miss doesn't seem possible. But here's one, back to back. More events are held indoors. They call this the Roan Wheel. We call it fantastic. Then an added fillip for the spectators as this blonde beauty turns a lot of heads, including her own. The trampoline has been recognized in international competition. It takes training and timing and the ups and downs of regular practice. The aesthetic side has not been neglected. There's been no attempt to hide art under a veil, as these girls prove. A festival of international goodwill that is rare in these days of world tension. What may prove to be the most versatile airplane ever designed goes aloft at Fort Worth for the first test of its folding wings, now called the F-111. The craft was known as the TFX during its conception. On takeoff and while it climbs, the wings are angled back at a conventional 16 degrees. When it reaches high altitude, the wings are folded back to an angle of 72 degrees. Then the radical plane can attain 3 times the speed of sound while suffering little from sonic shock waves. Thus, it is an airplane that has wings with great lifting power on takeoff and landing, while in flight, it becomes practically a flying bullet. Notice its resemblance to the paper planes we all made as kids. Will serve both the Air Force and the Navy, and test pilot Dick Johnson says that it will serve them well. An amphibious task group of the U.S. 7th Fleet lies off the Batangan Peninsula, preparing to send a force of thousands of U.S. Marines ashore. First, the big guns open up. As the bombardment fades away, landing ships move closer into shore, ready to land the Marines, as helicopters supply an observation and air cover, flying from the deck of the Princeton. Department of Defense cameramen follow every phase of the operation, one of the largest yet attempted in the Vietnam War. Nicknamed Operation Piranha, after the deadly South American fish, the landing is planned to trap Viet Cong troops on the peninsula. South Vietnamese troops are blocking all exits from Batangan, waiting for the Marines to drive the Reds into the net. Tank landing vehicles lead the way, followed by supporting heavy equipment aboard Navy landing craft. This was the beginning of a week-long operation that again proved the difficulty of this jungle fighting. The Viet Cong were holed up in tunnels. In one underground hideout, the Marines killed 66 Viet Cong with one blast of TNT. It is estimated that more than 200 Reds were wiped out by the Marines. or driven into the death trap manned by Vietnamese troops. Operation Piranha, the nearest thing to hand-to-hand fighting that U.S. troops can expect to find in this hit-and-run war.
If you switched on the radio in 1965, you would have heard songs like Hello Vietnam, Selma, Alabama, or Eve of Destruction. As those titles show, for the United States, 1965 was a year of turbulence. U.S. losses in Vietnam exceeded 1,300 dead and 6,100 wounded. And for the first time in America, anti-war demonstrations were common. Racial strife took its toll, too. Malcolm X was assassinated in New York City, and the Watts section of Los Angeles exploded in 6 days of riots. We were halfway through the 60s, and people were questioning authority as never before. Amid the turmoil, Americans were glued to their television sets, watching the events unfold. But there were some bright spots, too. Major Edward White took the first spacewalk, and New Yorkers proved they weren't afraid of the dark. This has been Year by Year. I'm Karen Stone for the History Channel. Thanks for joining us.
And on Friday,